Nobody knows what happens to us when we die. We don't know.
This is Joe Wong. Welcome to the Trap Set. During the age of social distancing, we're recording remotely and releasing new episodes every day.
The sidewalks are empty, the bars and cafes too. The streetlights only changing 'cause they ain't got nothing better to do. You say it's like Christmas when nobody's around, when our city was still a secret before those carpetbaggers came to town. The airport.
Today's guest is Ben Gibbard. Ben is best known as the vocalist and guitarist for Death Cab for Cutie and as co-founder of the Postal Service, two bands that were at the vanguard of the mainstream's embrace of indie rock in the early 2000s. Ben has also released solo albums and worked with artists such as Pinwheel, Jay Farrar, and All Time Quarterback. He spoke to me from his home in Washington State.
Inside the Safeway. Sorry, I've got this like weird interference. I get the local NPR affiliate through my through my rig here for some reason.
Terry Gross's ghost is haunting you.
It's funny because I'm getting a lot of it now. For like usually it's always been just kind of a little bit ghosted, and I usually don't have to. I usually kind of work around it. But for whatever reasons, I've been doing these live shows, it's been getting really loud. So I just went right into my little audio interface here. I kind of bypassed all the compressors and stuff. So I got that's a project for a later point.
Well, it sounds good, and actually, we can stay on regular FaceTime. I haven't tried that yet. I've been doing it on audio, so you'd just be hearing my disembodied voice, Terry Gross style.
Terry Gross style, right? Totally. I mean, I don't mind doing it. I don't mind doing it this way if you don't mind. Okay.
You have a gold record 45 behind you. What's that?
That is the Narrow Stairs gold record.
Did it go gold here in the States?
It did. You can't really see it in the frame, but I've got my little wall of placards here. We have Transatlanticism gold record. Plans Platinum album, Postal Service Platinum album, and then on the other corner there's a Canadian Platinum for Plans as well. And yeah, so kind of the back in the days when bands sold records, and like what a crazy concept now. It's really funny to like think about. Like it's very strange to kind of the new kind of methods of kind of quantifying success are completely lost on me. They involve kind of amalgamating streaming and
yes,
record sales and like YouTube plays, and it's a very odd kind of number that kind of doesn't make any sense to me. And being kind of old school, it just feels like not real,
To me, as somebody who grew up going to record stores, that's how it feels legit. Like when you can go into a store and find your record, then it's real. But that's just an artifact of another time, I realize.
Yeah, I mean, I feel the exact same way. But even having said that, I almost get angry when somebody gives me a CD now.
Right.
If somebody was like, "Here's my record,"
yeah.
I'm like, "What are you doing? Like, what am I supposed to do with this? Now I have this." As if somebody if you were to give me a vinyl copy of your new record, I would be stoked. I'd be like, "Yes, this is amazing." But the idea of CDs still being manufactured, and then also people actually buying them is so foreign to me. I went before the lockdown occurred. My wife and I went to Sonic Boom Records out in Ballard here in Seattle and got some records, and I was kind of amazed that there was such a large CD selection.
I want to give a shout out to one of the founders of Sonic Boom who was on the show, Mr. Nabil Ayers.
Love that guy. Love
now
Nabil.
He's running the U.S. office of 4AD Records.
That's a pretty amazing kind of trajectory, right? To go from running a successful but still relatively small independent record store, or at the time stores here in Seattle, and then ascend to basically running one of the most influential record labels in the world. And it's pretty great for Nabil. I'm so happy for him.
And now he has a major publishing deal, or a deal with a major publishing house to publish a memoir.
I remember I listened to the episode that he was on, and I had no idea about his backstory. I didn't, we've known each other for 22 years at this point, but I had no idea that he had such a crazy story.
And the interesting thing is his biological dad, Roy Ayers, had been on my show a couple years before I met Nabil. And when we first hung out, I was like, "Oh, any relation to Roy Ayers?" And he's like, "Yeah, it's my dad." So I was kind of shocked. Although it does make sense because he looks almost like a facsimile of Roy, but he hadn't mentioned it, and it became clear why later. But anyway, so how are you doing, Ben?
I'm doing fine. We as all the guys in the band are doing fine. It's very difficult to kind of complain about getting some solo shows canceled or a festival canceled right now when the state of the world and the level of anxiety that people are feeling. The unemployment numbers being what they are, it's, I'm in no position to complain at all about my life in this particular kind of time. I've been doing these kind of daily YouTube shows on Facebook, which, are going to go through this Sunday. And that's been really fun to do, and it seems like people are enjoying them. And my life when I'm at home is kind of a version of this. I'm spending a lot of time in my studio. I'm working on music. I'm going for runs. Obviously there's a little more socializing and whatnot, and going out to see bands and go to restaurants and stuff like that. But I'm in no position to complain about my experience in this particular time.
Man, I feel the same. I feel so grateful that I already work from home. I have a recording studio behind my house where I make music for films and TV shows, which people are consuming more than ever right now.
Yeah, totally.
And I'm healthy. So there's really, aside from feeling like I have nothing to complain about, I feel viscerally lucky right now. And I feel like people like us who chose to make music for a living or wound up on that path, usually it's a much less stable vocation than many others. But in this one instance, I feel like my life is more stable than lots of people. So lucky me.
Yeah, I feel the exact same way. We were fortunate to kind of, in the mid-aughts to kind of, make a little nest egg that we could kind of put away, and that period especially, and the music that I kind of was involved in writing or wrote during that period has certainly given me a financial buffer for periods like this that most people don't have. So. I feel like this is one of those opportunities where people in our situations, almost have an obligation to do something to, alleviate in some small way, just the avalanche of shit that is coming at people every day. And also, one thing I so appreciate about your show, and I'm a fan of your show, I listen to your show all the time. I really appreciate that you go into a daily show. For me, I look at my podcasts, and every one of them in the description is like COVID-19, da 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 da. Will COVID-19 affect the baseball season? Da da da. COVID-19, and it's just so nice to kind of hear people talk about, their origin stories as musicians and talk about their process and stuff like that. Because right now, I think one thing I've been trying to emphasize on my little YouTube shows is it's okay to take a break from this. It's okay to focus on something else for a period of the day or an entire day. I mean, things are coming at us rather quickly, but none of them are necessarily good right now. And it's important for people to just realize they have responsibility to their own mental health to kind of just put down the phone for a second,
Right. And I feel like I'm also lucky to be able to make this show every day.
Totally.
Instead of being in an existential panic. I was a waiter when I was starting out in music, and I grew up in the restaurant business, and I think a lot about people that have a career in food service, or my mom who's still working as an RN, and I really just feel so grateful to them, and I feel concerned that so many people are going without right now, and so I'm so happy to be able to do this.
Yeah, I mean,
I hope that doesn't come off as hokey, but I really feel it in a very serious way.
Well, I would think that people are very happy that you're doing this as well. People, and the analogy I've been using, be it a little bit wonky, is, we live kind of down the street from a school, and if a meteor hit that school, we would all know what to do. We'd be like, okay, well, we got to raise some money to fix the school, and where the kid's going to learn during that period, and we should probably do a benefit concert or something, or there is a series of kind of there are steps to take to kind of get a situation like that as normal as it can get back to after a meteor hits a school. But in this case, the meteor just hit everywhere at the same time, and it is so difficult when everybody is in need and everybody is hurting right now, and the ripple effects of this are just so unbelievably kind of cutting, to even know where to start. Where do you even start as one person, as an individual who wants to kind of help out?
Yeah. On the bright side, I hope that it makes us reconsider some of the policies that led us to this path in the first place. And I'm not talking about creating the virus, but led us to our miserable response to it, and hopefully it will inspire us to make some changes as a species. And I just think about how clean the air is right now in Pasadena, where I am. And it's almost as if we're the virus and the planet is trying to get rid of us because we've been abusing it for so long.
Well, yeah, I have a degree in environmental chemistry, and I went to Western Washington University, and there
they have Dexter.
Right,
I need to rub it in my face.
Well, it's it's really at this point, it's like so far in my rear view, it's not even something I can reference. But I do remember, I went to this environmental studies school that was part of the university. And, there's a lot of rhetoric about saving the planet and how we need to save the planet. And we kind of hear those words kind of spoken all the time now. And my position on it has kind of evolved or devolved, I guess, to the planet's going to be fine. It's just whether or not we're going to be here or not. That's the question. So we need to kind of start thinking about our future from an almost even more kind of selfish perspective of, do we want clean water and air here in 20 or 30 years? Do we want to not, and so, yeah, I mean, look, the planet will be fine, but
we're literally destroying our viability on the planet using the fossils of another species that was wiped out. Some other species will come along if we go extinct and eat plastic and drink dirty water, and that's how life will evolve.
Exactly. That's also a very good way of putting it. I don't want to be flippant about it, and saying the planet will be quote unquote fine, but we are it is kind of strange that one of the, I mean, to even call it a fringe benefit seems insensitive, but to notice that we are experiencing periods of vastly improved air and water quality, right? Or certainly air quality at the very minimum is a very strange kind of benefit that's coming out of this crisis,
Well, you're an ultra marathoner. Have you been noticing a difference in the air quality as you're running?
No, not really. It's pretty good here in Seattle. I mean, any city is not great, but I just went on a super long run around the city this morning just to kind of survey survey some of the streets that I haven't gone down and whatnot. It's kind of more of like an urban adventure run. And also because, DNR and the state parks and have all closed. They've closed all the trails. They've, closed all the parking lots and stuff because, I think as with many kind of occurrences in this kind of world we're living in now, people are seemingly unable to do the right thing on their own, and they need to kind of have the hammer brought down. It's like, and so there were too many people out. It was really nice last weekend, so there was too many people out on the trails, and it was just really, really crazy. So, a lot of my running now is just kind of urban running, and it was really interesting, though, to just kind of be running down the middle of a street in downtown Seattle. And, that would be instant death if I did it at any other time. And to just be like, oh yeah, there's a car about a half mile down the road. I'll get out of the road here in a second. I mean, it was pretty weird. It's pretty weird out there. It's not to say it's not like I Am Legend out there or anything like that, but it is, there's just a lot fewer people kind of out on the streets and about. And honestly, that's a good thing, the less people kind of just going about their business as if nothing is wrong, I think will put us in a better situation in the long run here.
So how's your family doing, and how are your kids adapting to this?
Well, I don't have kids, so...
you don't have kids?
I don't have kids, no. But Jason and Nick from our band do, and I think that, my sister has a kid. I think that everybody's, kind of being like, everybody's getting stretched a little thin. But my family is doing well. I mean, my parents are in their early 70s. They live in Bremerton, across the water. They're just kind of holed up doing their thing. My sister and her spouse are holed up in Burien doing their thing, raising a little kid. So, as we said earlier, my life hasn't really changed that much from before all this kind of occurred. I don't know if it's not something, it's not that the word isn't thankful, but, I do know I have a lot of friends with kids, obviously at my age, I'm 43. And, they are losing their minds, having children around all the time that they are now responsible for educating, and, kind of watching like hawks 24/7. I mean, I have friends who are losing their minds right now. So I'm just trying to be a good sounding board for them.
I will say I spoke to your drummer, Jason, the other day. And he's doing this really cool tactile learning project with his kids where they're going out into the woods and learning how to survive. And I think that's really cool.
Oh my God. That does not surprise me in the least bit. That is classic Jason McGurr. We've always kind of had this bit in the band that if, we're dealing with the apocalypse, whose house are we going to go to? And the answer is, without question, we're going to McGurr's house. We're going to figure out a way to get up there. He's probably got a bunker or something.
It sounds like a bunker. I mean, he was describing his level of preparation, and it's pretty next level. I won't go into the details, but it's pretty amazing.
No, he kind of comes from that, survivalist kind of background. I mean, he worked at like a sporting goods store that dealt, in all kind of survival and camping gear and stuff like that. So we've always known that if the shit really hits the fan, we're all gonna have to figure out a way to get to Bellingham somehow.
was born today, and I'll tell you how. The clouds above opened up and let it out. I was standing on the surface of a perforated sphere when the water filled every hole.
A few months ago, we recorded another episode of this show when you were here in LA, and it was kind of in between rehearsals as I was getting ready to play a show, and you were just about to play a charity benefit that evening. So we were both kind of rushed, and I'm glad that we have a chance to talk again. And doing this doesn't preclude us from maybe putting out that other episode at another point, but there was a reason why the world has kind of shifted into a different mindset in the subsequent months, so we decided to give it another go.
Yeah, and I appreciate you kind of being down for that. I don't think we discussed anything. I can't remember, the totality of what we discussed, but I did have this feeling that we might have talked about some things that would seem a little bit, kind of uncouth right now. Although I do remember we did discuss that I had this fear that, something terrible was going to happen at any moment because, for the most part, my life has been a fairly smooth sail. And I'm wondering if what we're going through right now might be the beginning of that. I don't quite know.
Well, I don't know. You know what they say? It's like the thing that you're obsessively worried about tends to come to fruition. Not that it's causal, but that's what you're latching onto. That's the trajectory. But I don't know. I mean, yeah, what I remember is that you said, your family is still healthy. Most of the people that you love are still with us. You've had creative success and also a nice measure of popular and financial success. So you were just waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Yeah, exactly. That's, it just seems like it can't be this smooth sailing forever, right? There has to be something. I don't want to tempt that fate, but yeah, I mean, I think probably at the very core of my fear is just losing the people that I love, and that is going to happen. There is no, unless I go first, that's how it goes, right? And I think that what I've been trying to do, especially, when I hop on the phone with my dad or whatever, or my mom, my sister, my friends, especially now in this climate, I'm just trying to make sure that I'm very present in a way that maybe I wouldn't have been before. Before if my dad would have called me like, yeah, and I'm like on my phone, yeah, totally, because he'd start rambling. But now I'm realizing like, yeah, this is a time to be very present with the people that you are conversing with or in the presence of. And also, this is a really good time to let people know how much you love them and how much you appreciate them. Mm-hmm. Because, we just don't know what the future is going. Well, we never do, but, it seems even more uncertain now.
Well, I feel like I spent most of my life with the looming fear of losing the people I love. I think part of that is because I'm neurotic by nature. Another part of it is that, I was not raised in a religious context. So when I was a kid and I was asking my parents about what happens when you die, they weren't able to give me a satisfactory answer. It was just, we don't know. Mm-hmm. You die. And when I believed in magic, like, one year I asked Santa for immortality for my family. So that shows you that like our brain is evolved to seek out like faith in God, even though I don't particularly have any. I think, it's something that we want and it's a primal fear. But as somebody who kind of has that temperament, when I lost my dad about a year ago, I feel like it took death off of a pedestal. I mean, it was tragic. His story was tragic. and it was overwhelming, but it also felt unremarkable in a certain way. It was almost just like watching a birth, or it felt like a natural process. And after it happened, and I'd had some time to process it, I feel like there was that fear was gone, because the fear is enhanced when it's in the abstract. And when it's real, as painful as it is, it's not, it didn't, at least in my case, it didn't feel like it was looming anymore. And it felt like, it made sense. It was like, okay, this is a parameter. This is like the end point. And now I know where I am. And it gave me like an increased appreciation of all the time that we'd spent together. And like you said, like, I'm glad that for the last 10 years of my dad's life, I was pretty present. But anyway, if that's of any comfort at all, it happens. And then when it does, you keep living and you move on, and I think that, our culture isolates us from that process, and we don't observe it. Like, we don't see, our grandparents aren't typically living with us in our house when they die, when we're little, It's something that we don't observe, and it's very natural, and it's just as natural as being born,
Well, yeah. And kudos to your parents for having, the courage to tell you the truth, I mean,
that was their truth.
But it is the truth. Nobody knows what happens to us when we die. We don't know. People have faith. If I was brought up Catholic, and I was told a particular story about what happens to us after we die. But, I love that Jeff Tweedy line that theologians don't know nothing about my soul. It's like, we do not know. The most kind of confident, televangelist knows as much about what happens to us when we die as a 3-year-old. We don't know. And, I from a very young age kind of, it wasn't that I had this innate kind of questioning of everything I was taught in church, but it just all felt like it wasn't, it's one of the reasons I ended up studying science. I appreciated, zeros and ones and numbers and truth. And to this day,
truth.
I appreciate quantitative truth. And I have the utmost respect for people of faith. I have a number of friends who are people of faith. My parents are people of faith. But I do take issue in conversation when people claim that they know what happens to us when we die. They know what death is. And, the reality is that they don't. But they have such a strong belief system that they believe that they do.
Yeah, I mean, the big question is, are we something beyond our physical manifestation, right? Like, in the same way that words on a page are really just like droplets of ink, but that they represent a much larger idea, is our matter here on Earth, like a spiritual alphabet that's, will exist, beyond our existence on the planet. I don't know.
And if it's not, I guess that's fine, right? I mean, if you're not around to experience an afterlife or some, maybe not even higher plane of existence, but some alternative plane of existence that kind of transcends our physical being. I don't know what's so bad about just you're not going to be there to be like, holy shit, this is terrible,
right?
That this doesn't exist. It just will not exist. And, come back, come talk to me on my deathbed and see if I still feel the same way.
You might. I mean,
I might. I don't know.
Because I think that it's interesting that we're having this conversation, because I was just writing about it earlier. But I think that ego and self are machinations of our mind that were evolved to keep us alive, and they become less useful when it becomes apparent that we're going to die, and then it can almost be like an unburdening to let go of that stuff.
I agree 100%. I mean, but we will all find out as individuals. We will find out, and I kind of look at my impending death at some point. Hopefully not
impending.
Too soon. Well, I mean, it's going to happen at some point, right? I mean, I'm hoping it's like in 40 years and not tomorrow. But there's I think there's a beauty in knowing that we're going to get the answer. Whether or not we are there to experience and understand it is a whole nother question. But we're going to get the answer, and so even though I was brought up Catholic, and I think while Catholicism is not a ethnicity, it certainly feels like it almost borders an ethnicity, in the sense that everyone I know who was brought up Catholic has these tracers of that experience that color how they view the world and how they move through the world, even as adults who have, long ago kind of rejected that dogma.
Sure. I mean, my mom is a lapsed Catholic, and she's still masterful at making me feel guilty. So there you go.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very and I understand. My mom still goes to church every Sunday, or at least was before before the isolation. I mean, I certainly get the appeal of Catholicism in the sense that the world continues to change, and sometimes the world changes in ways that are very hard to understand. But this has been a constant in my mom's life and other people's lives who are Catholic, that, the Mass is said the same way. It's been said the same way your entire life. If you're old enough, maybe it was in Latin and now it's in whatever language is your native tongue. But it's basically the same. And, that is exactly one of my biggest issues with it, of course. But, I totally get why Catholicism is such an appealing religion to people. Because in a world that's constantly changing, this thing remains a point of comfort and something that resembles the thing that you learned when you were a child.
How do you balance your analytical mind with your creative mind? And how does it manifest when you're writing songs?
I feel as a songwriter, I've known songwriters who take a very analytical approach, almost scientific approach to songwriting. I'm not super close with Rivers, but Rivers Cuomo is like one of those people. I mean, there's, the stories of, him keeping books of like, this is
spreadsheet with pop
spreadsheets.
Songs. Yeah,
exactly. I was just going to say that. And it's like, this is how this song works. And, this is how this works. And I'm going to use this formula to make the thing that I'm making. And he certainly had some great results with that. But for me, even as someone with kind of a more, science kind of based mind and how I kind of view the world and how I'm, skeptical of mysticism and things like that. I find songwriting to be an incredibly amorphous and kind of spiritual experience, at the risk of sounding incredibly pretentious. Because, my ex-wife had said at one point, and I need to give her credit for this because I think it's a great quote. She said, songwriting is like alchemy. It's like there's nothing there. Or magic. There was nothing there, and now there's a song there. and it defies the laws of physics. Like, you cannot create matter begets matter. If you want to make a house, it comes from things that already exist, right? But songs kind of live in this weird amorphous kind of nether region of the mind that, I went into my studio today, and well, not today, but just this is the hypothetical today, and I picked up an instrument without any expectation of finding anything in it. And when I left my studio, I had a song, and hopefully it was a song that I'm really proud of. And that song did not exist before I walked into the studio that morning. It did not exist. I mean, of course, the influences of that piece of music, maybe the lyrics were taken or influenced by something I was reading, a particular chord change. Maybe I stole it from a Beatles song, either consciously or subconsciously, but it didn't exist before I made it. And to me, that kind of pursuit is something that is still so fascinating to me. I mean, I've been doing these live shows every day, and we've been playing songs throughout the entire catalog of music that I've been involved in making. And, at the end of the day, still the thing that gives me the most joy in life is that moment when I've finished something that I'm really proud of. And I'm still chasing that, 22, 23 years into my career, that sense of self-satisfaction you get from finishing a song that you're proud of. And I'm sure you have the same experience. It's one of the greatest feelings in the world. You're sitting in a room by yourself and you've got this piece of music and you're thinking like, I want to play this for somebody, or I can't wait till people hear this. And then you realize that like Bob Dylan did that, and David Bowie did that, or Paul McCartney. And am I by no means putting myself in that echelon, but everyone you've ever admired as a musician, from like the biggest rock star in the world down to like the, indie kind of cred, like basement, 4-track guy, or a gal, has all been having that feeling when they finish something. And I would think about David Bowie sitting in a room, not unlike this room, in all intents and purposes, and finishing like, Let's Dance or something, and being like, wow, really, really made a good song today, right? I mean, he had to, right?
I don't know. Right? I mean, see, in my case, I don't have that same kind of I historically, I haven't had that same confidence right away. I'm like, that's not so bad. Never elevates to the point of like, this is amazing.
Oh, I don't want to give you the impression that I don't have that. I don't sit around after I finish a song and think this song is really going to help people. I don't.
No, but I feel like I think one of the things that was blocking me for years when I like admitted to myself that I wanted to write songs and not just play drums or not just compose music for film or TV, one of the things that was blocking me was getting in touch with that voice that was allowing myself to be proud of it or to feel good about what I was making, because I was very like negative inside. But I know what you mean. Yeah, like after you finish something and you're feeling good about it and you want to put it out in the world and give it a life of its own.
Yeah, I mean that to this day is the most rewarding feeling in all of this. Second only to performing that piece of music in front of people and actually having the opportunity to see the connection that people have to it. And I think it's one of the beautiful things about being a musician and a songwriter, or being in a band, is that there is not, to my knowledge, any other art form in which you make something and then you spend potentially the rest of your life sharing that exact thing with people.
Stand-up comedians always complain about that because they have to come up with a new hour of material every year and then discard it.
Yeah, or think of, if Dave Eggers writes a heartbreaking work of Saturday Genius, and then he's not just gonna like take that book around for the next 20 years and be like, So if you'd like to hear chapter 3, I'd love to read you chapter 3.
Right.
You know, if you're an actor and you're like Joaquin Phoenix and you just, won an Oscar for the Joker, you don't just go out in the world playing the hits like being Joker, right?
Right.
You're on to other stuff. And that has been one of the most rewarding things about my career and our career as a band is that, I think now in 2020, we are fairly far removed from the records that, will be in like our obituary, right? And that's not to say that I'm not proud of the records we've made in the last 10 years, but, for me with Give Up, the Postal Service record, or Transatlanticism and Plans, like these were records that were of a moment, when indie rock kind of went from the music that you and I listened to in the 90s with like a couple other people to being this music that was filling venues way bigger than we could ever imagine it to. And we were swept up in that kind of wave. And it's been kind of amazing to be playing these songs that are now 17 years old in some, and even older, some of the older stuff. And to see how some of this music is affecting people who were not even alive when it came out, or were way too young to have been into it when it was out. And that is not unique to our band. It is just a part of living in a world with recorded music.
I want to get back to our conversation on songwriting. I like that alchemy or magical analogy. Last week I spoke to Buzz from the Melvins, and he likened songwriting to panning for gold. I've also heard of people referring to it like fishing, where you're casting. All you can do as a good songwriter is, make sure that you're good at casting your line, and then some days you get lucky and some days you don't. And yeah, it seems to me like what we're talking about is mining some part of our subconscious. It's not like it's materializing out of nowhere. In reality, it's a product of who we are and the experiences that we're not even necessarily noticing. Things that make an impression on our subconscious mind that then kind of coalesces without our knowledge, our conscious knowledge, and then the process of songwriting is mining that, maybe.
Yeah, I would agree. For every record from Transatlanticism on, I've probably averaged between 30 and 40 songs that go into the coffers that we pick the record from. And the overwhelming majority of the songs are unreleasable. They're just, they're the thing. I went into the studio in the morning and I picked up a guitar and I played something and I decided to record it and I sang something and whatever. But, what I've learned over my years of doing this is that even those experiments or songs that you write that at the time seem worthless or they seem bad or they seem like a waste of time, there are inevitably moments in those songs, be them a lyric here or a guitar part there, just the very just the whisper of an idea that I inevitably end up mining later, or that you go, oh, I wrote this thing and oh shit, the lyrics were kind of good, but I remember the music was kind of bad. And I do need something here. Well, maybe we could, and then da-da-da-da-da, and then you're off to the races. So yeah. I feel there's never, it feels like wasted time, when I'm in a dry patch or kind of a bad patch where I'm just looking at a month's worth of work and just being like, God, this is all just not any good, but then inevitably out of nowhere comes something that, you wouldn't, I really believe you wouldn't have been able to harness had you not spent that month, quote unquote, wasting time.
Right. And I would posit that the people that are most creatively successful are those that are willing to go to that uncomfortable place where they're making bad work if necessary, where they're just willing to go through that and sit in that discomfort for as long as necessary before, things turn around and work that they're happy with starts coming out.
Yeah, I think so too. You know, I think when I was younger and we were making the first couple records, I would never, you know, I've been kind of doing this project where I found, I knew what they were, but I kind of dug up all these old 4-track tapes of my demos from 1996, 4-track demos from like 1996 until 2003 when I got Pro Tools. And I've been loading them all into Pro Tools sessions, you know, maybe to do something with at some point, who knows, but just to archive them. And it's been really interesting to realize that in the early years of this band, pretty much everything I decided to record became something that was on a record. You know, I didn't finish things that I wasn't super duper stoked about. And, you know, that was just my MO. I didn't write as much as I do now, but, you know, when I had an idea, I would really chase it. And, you know, some of those records are some of people's favorite records and some of my best work. So, you know, I don't know if it's kind of, you know, it's the audacity of being that young and inexperienced and not really knowing what the quote rules unquote are or not. But I think that's one of the things that makes any artist's early period so exciting is that, you know, the canvas is all open and there is plenty of room to, you know, you've got so much room to work with. But the older you get, the more material you've put in the world. The canvas is filling up, and you're having, I feel, fewer and fewer places to kind of make something, you know, in the margins. You know.
Love of mine, someday you will die, but I'll be close behind. They'll follow you into the dark, no blinding light or tunnels to gates of white, just our hands clasped so tight, waiting for the hint of a spark. And if heaven and hell decide that they both are satisfied, and illuminate the nose on their vacancy signs, if there's no one beside you when your soul embarks, then I'll follow you into the dark. In Catholic school.
The other thing that I think makes lots of younger artists or new artists' early work exciting is because you get to hear them come into their own voice. Like, think about the Beatles and how they were covering Isley Brothers and other, you know, kind of R&B standards early on, and then you could hear that influence in their original music, and then over the course of the first couple albums you hear this unique creative voice emerge, and that's really exciting. And then once that voice is established, you know, which is something that you've established your own creative voice that people are familiar with, I imagine that it's then harder to kind of like not necessarily top yourself, but to make statements as you keep going that can have as big of an impact as when the voice first emerges, you know? And I suppose that's why lots of artists, you know, you mentioned David Bowie, that's why lots of artists, you know, consciously reinvent themselves in order to kind of force themselves into working in different ways. Yeah,
you know, it might come off like a slight cop-out to put it in these terms, but, you know, we can't make, you know, those records again as much as the people who were listening to them can't be 20 years old and in college.
Right,
you know?
Exactly.
And so there, you know, the zeitgeist moment of this music comes into the world seemingly out of nowhere. This band, you know, not this band, but a band becomes your favorite band. And then that bar is so high that it becomes virtually impossible to make anything that will kind of have the same emotional impact on the listener, but also have the same kind of impact on the world. Right. You know, it's like if you're U2 and you put out the Joshua Tree, for example, you know, It's like that record was so big. It was so of the time. You know, I'm sure people might have feelings about the Joshua Tree, but for me, you know, that was a record that came out when I was 11 and was just starting to kind of find music that I liked on my own, you know? And of course, you know, the music that, you know, at 11, unless you have a super cool older brother, which I didn't have, you know, you're kind of
Or sister.
Or sister, yeah. You know, you are kind of resigned to the radio. You're resigned to what's on MTV. And for me at 11, you know, even before that, I knew I loved music, you know, but hearing some of the songs on that record, you know, just had such an amazing impact. They just had such an impact on me. And they, you know, it might sound a little bit kind of silly now because, you know, U2 is such, and even that record is such a point of derision for a lot of people. And there was certainly a lot of, you know, as I've gotten older, you realize, well, there's a lot of much more interesting music happening and challenging things in the world at that point, other than U2. But for an 11-year-old kid, that record just, it was like I'd never heard anything like it, and I thought it was amazing.
Right. An infant eats milk or baby food. You're not going to serve an infant steak. You know, it's like there's a time and a place, you know, when you're going to be receptive to different kinds of music, and for what that album is, I mean, just the fact that it had that impact on you and millions of other people means something. And
I still stand by that record. I think it's great. I don't have a I actually like that thing. You know, it's like, no, I still put that record on and still am blown away that With or Without You is just 4 chords and somehow feels like a complete statement. I mean, that is one of the things that's so I mean, just take that song, for example. It's such a ubiquitous tune. We've heard it a gajillion times. But at the core of that tune, you have the same progression for like 4.5 minutes. And I'll tell you, anybody who's listening who might not be a songwriter, it is so hard to keep people's interest, you know, and to make a piece of music feel like it's building and changing when the very kind of foundation of it is staying completely the same the whole time. And to this day, I hear that song on the radio or whatever, walking around, and you're just like, man, what an amazing tune. You know, I don't ever need to hear it again, you know, because I've heard it a million times, you know, but, you know, I always want to make sure that when, you know, I think it's very easy for people in our situation to kind of create some revisionist history about the things that they liked and, you know, try to make themselves seem a little cooler than they were when they were young. But you know, I mean, I'll go to the mat for U2 any day of the week.
Tell me about the live stream performances you've been giving lately.
Yeah, I've been. So, you know, when we all got quarantined, or, you know, certainly we got quarantined in our own little way. Well, not a little way, in a very real way here in the Northwest. You know, I just kind of had this idea that it might be nice to, you know, go online and play some songs for people. And I don't necessarily know why I did this in hindsight, but I decided to commit to like 2 weeks and just play every day. And it's been kind of a lot of fun, you know, watching this, you know, small community of, you know, fans and kind of looky-loos kind of, you know, kind of tuning in and asking questions. And selfishly, it's been a lot of fun for me to kind of go through some of the kind of more like the uncharted waters of my own catalog, you know, songs that the band stopped playing 20 years ago or maybe never played, kind of weird singles and obscure tracks here and there. So, you know, every day I've been doing sets that are pretty much, you know, holistically by request. And over the last week or so, we've kind of, every day has been a different era of my work and the work of the band. So on Monday we did 97 to 2001, and then we did 2002 to 2005, and on and so forth and so on. And as we tape this on a Friday, we put up like a little kind of chart that people could vote on their favorite top 10 songs that of mine, be it with the band, solo, or with Postal Service. And and I just got the list here, and like over 14,000 people voted, which is kind of cool. And it's just interesting to see what people chose. I'm going to play them in kind of a countdown style when we hop off this call.
How does it feel versus playing an actual live show in a room with other people?
Well, I mean, this, people have been doing a version of this now for a decade, right? And
or if we take it back to like the Ed Sullivan Show or whatever, even longer.
Yeah, I mean, I guess people have been doing a version of this, looking into their webcam on their computer or whatever, and talking to an audience of X amount of people. And the first day I did this, I felt a little awkward because at 43, this is something that teenagers do all the time. I have friends who are professional YouTube people who have a niche, and they go on YouTube and they interface with people and they take questions and they do little shows and stuff like that. So I felt kind of behind the curve on it. But I feel like, I'm starting to get the hang of it. It's just you play a song and then it's just quiet because you're in a room by yourself. But, I'll keep a chat open on the right side of the screen, and usually I'll keep it closed while I'm playing the songs, just to make sure I don't kind of get distracted by reading people's comments or questions, or whatever. But it's been really enjoyable. I mean, every show we're kind of tying to a particular charity that I've been supporting, or that has kind of cropped up in the wake of this virus, and it's been really amazing to see how altruistic people are being right now. I've initially started out trying to kind of do these shows for organizations that didn't necessarily need monetary donations, because I'm very aware of the fact that people are fucking broke, and people are worried about their jobs. People are being laid off. People are trying to figure out how they're going to make the rent. The last thing they need is, someone who's financially sound, asking them to give their money, to an organization. And it's been really amazing to see the response. There was an organization I'm wearing the sweatshirt right now, for Aurora Commons. And, they are kind of a safe house in kind of a rough area of Seattle for people who are temporarily experiencing homelessness, and people who are sex workers. And they were in desperate need of tents and sleeping bags because all the shelters have been closed. The hotels are full, and people are being forced into the streets to sleep because, we don't in Seattle currently have a place for people who are living in this area to go and sleep. And so I made this plea, and, within 48 hours, they had, 2 trucks full of sleeping bags, pickup trucks full of sleeping bags and tents that people had donated. And it's, I'm not putting that on me like I did something amazing. I'm just more impressed that people, who have the ability to do so are being so altruistic right now, because I really believe that human beings want to help other human beings, but that sometimes they struggle to know what to do, or, what people need. Does that make sense? Like, they don't, they want to, help, if you're like, I want to help Planned Parenthood, and you call Planned Parenthood and say, how do I help you guys? Not to, single them out. They're great. But I'm sure it's, somebody's like, well, we could use some help with this or that. And it can be a little bit difficult to kind of for a person to put themselves in a situation that they're not quite sure what they're doing or how they're helping. But if you tell someone, these people need tents and sleeping bags. If you have an extra one of these things, please give it to them. People are like, yes, I will do that because I have an extra one of those. I just got a new one, and I'm doing something to help out another person. And I really believe that, in order to get people to help other people, you just need to point them in the right direction.
That makes a lot of sense. Point them in a right direction, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think that, and so it's been, I've been really impressed with how, we'll do a show for a food bank, and then I'll get an email saying like, yeah, we got $2,000 in donations yesterday. And it's like, great. And I'm trying to not make sure that I'm not laying it on too thick. I'm not, trying to kind of like, public radio pledge drive people with this stuff, but just, remind people like, hey, look, if you're just here to take an hour out of your day and forget that the world is a fucking mess right now, by all means do that. But if you have the ability, consider doing something or giving $5 to this food bank or whatever, like the price of admission for this show. If you were going to a show, it would be X amount of dollars, and it would just be going to like me, but I don't need the money. These places need your resources more than I do. And I've just been really impressed with how generous people have been.
What's next for you?
Well, I think the real question is what's next for any of us, right? If let's just say that by some, positive twist of fate, that we are able to resume our lives as much as we knew them as we can, by the, let's fuck it, pick a date, July 1st, the band has some shows booked. We have some shows booked for some festivals in Mexico in May, which I'm almost, we have not yet gotten an official word on whether or not those are happening or not. But, if it seems unlikely at this point. And we have some shows booked for August. And, I'm just like kind of trying to throw logs on the fire of this next record, try to keep writing tunes. I think if I was being optimistic, I'd say I have between half and 2/3 of a good record written. Probably closer to half than 2/3. 2/3 might be being a little optimistic, but as far as just my personal life and things I like to do, virtually every race I've been signed up has been canceled, which is fine. It's not like these things do not matter in the least bit right now. I think like everyone, I think everyone would obviously like to get back to their jobs and their friends and their families and be able to kind of congregate en masse and sing along with their favorite bands and laugh at comedians making fun of shit. And we don't know when that day is going to be. It will come.
I wonder how long the sense of like increased appreciation is going to last after that. Are we going to be so grateful that it will last for a long time and change the way we conduct ourselves because we will have an increased awareness of how lucky we are to be able to congregate, or are we going to forget about it in about a month?
Well, I don't know if optimistic is the right word, but I believe that we will remember it. And I think it's important to recognize that people of our generation have known not a single austerity measure in our lives. We did not live through a depression. We might live through depression, but we have not lived through a depression. We have not lived through a draft. We have not lived through war rationing. We have been able to, we have been involved in wars and such. And I don't want to in any way diminish the sacrifice that people have made in those campaigns. but life at home has remained pretty constant and pretty, affluent for my entire life.
In America.
In America, exactly. Yeah, and, Americans have been living a kind, a version of the same life my entire life. People go buy cars, they go to restaurants, they go on vacation. Obviously, as I'm saying this, I recognize that these are things that not everyone in America gets to experience. I'm not trying to be flippant or insensitive about that, but we have not known an event in the world that has directly affected our ability to go about our business without hindrance. And I would like to hope that, obviously, number one, this doesn't go on for too long. But if it does, that when we come out on the other side of this, that people will recognize, how wonderful life is for the most part in this country.
Yeah, and I hope it'll bring out the best in people in the way that other tragedies or other hardships have in the past.
Yeah, think about, I'll admit this, that if I was walking down the street, it doesn't happen in Seattle hardly at all. I've never seen it in Seattle, but I'm walking down the street somewhere in America, and I see somebody wearing a MAGA hat. My first reaction is something I'm a little bit embarrassed of. I would jump to conclusions. I would kind of, take a little bit of like this is another one of the us versus them elements of the culture war we're living in America, and we're so divided, and how are we going to survive this election or this year or whatever. But at this point, it's so difficult for me to care about that shit, and I would hope, and I think that it's given me a new perspective on just how, just how kind of polarizing I've allowed my own feelings about people's differing political opinions to kind of affect my view of their humanity.
Right.
And that's embarrassing. I'm embarrassed to admit that, but I'm sure a lot of people listening probably feel the same way. And, I have even before this kind of crisis, fell upon us, I've been trying to do this work within myself to just remove the us versus them mentality from how I view being an American. And it's incredibly difficult. I have bad days with it. I have bad days where I revert right back to, we're right, you're wrong, fuck you. But I think the fact that I'm trying to kind of break that cycle is something that I wish more people would join me in. And I hope
they don't. They're fucked up, terrible people, and they should
Exactly.
fucking die.
My brand of I have a very extreme brand of inclusion, where if you don't follow my brand of inclusion, well, fuck you, man.
Well, I think that's a great place to end it, and I know you have a show coming up. So, Ben, thank you so much for being part of the Trap Set.
I am so happy to be here, Joe. Thanks for having me, and we will speak very soon. I think it's worth noting that you have been just a blur on my screen for the last 25 minutes, but I did not want to stop the conversation to have us redial in.
Okay.
But you look kind of like a 4AD record cover right now. It's just kind of a blur with a little thing that says poor connection, and it's like, I think if you still need an album cover, I think this.
You should send me a screenshot. I have one, but the vinyl factory is shut down now, so I guess I could always swap it out.
Yeah.
The Trap Set is produced by me, Joe Wong, along with Chris Karwowski, who also edits the program. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at The Trap Set, and visit our website, thetrapset.net, to subscribe to our show for free. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please donate to our show. If you can't afford to donate, please tell a friend and give us a good rating on iTunes. Send your feedback and guest requests to thetrapset@gmail.com.